Um, I'll start with Dr. Busayo Israel Ajuwon. Dr. Ajuwon holds a PhD in epidemiology and population health from the Australian National University, with expertise in translation research and evidence synthesis for clinical practice and policy making. He develops and applies cutting-edge machine learning and artificial intelligence techniques in population health research to improve health outcomes, accelerate discoveries, and deliver real-world impacts. In 2021, Dr. Ajuwon was awarded an early career research grant by the National Institute for Health Research in the United Kingdom to support the development of a pioneering machine learning tool for early detection of hepatitis B virus infection. Dr. Ajuwon's research outputs include publications in top-tier scientific journals, such as the BMJ Global Health, International Journal of Medical Informatics, scientific reports, amongst others. Dr. Ajuwon enjoys writing non-technical articles on health and technology to drive social change and promote scientific outcomes. He has authored a significant number of articles for The Conversation, a leading international publisher of research-based news and analysis. These articles have reached over 23.4 million people, leading to media interviews, including a recent feature by the ANU College of Health and Medicine. Dr. Ajuwon is a recipient of multiple prestigious awards, including the 2021 Peter Bohm HDR Award by the ANU National Center for Epidemiology and Population Health. Dr. Ajuwon, thank you very much for being here with us today. Then our next speaker, before we go into the substance of this webinar, I'll just introduce our next speaker very briefly, Dr. Ife Ofunne. Dr. Ofunne holds, in addition to an MBBS degree in Nigeria, he holds a postgraduate qualification in family medicine, a Master of Laws degree, an LLM, specializing in medical law, a Master of Philosophy, MPhil in Health Management, as well as postgraduate in Philosophy, Applied Ethics, all from South Africa. He's also trained in health professions education. He's currently a Chief Medical Officer in Namibia, where he serves as Technical Advisor to the Ministry of Health on health policy, medical law, and bioethics, and has served as a consultant to the World Health Organization. In both positions, he has also extensively developed guidelines, and one of his innovative projects is in introducing the legal and ethical perspective to clinical guideline development. He has also served as an adjunct lecturer on professional ethics at the University of Namibia, where he was responsible for curriculum development and training. He's also HPCNA accredited to provide trainings on medical law and ethics. His research areas include pandemic ethics, as well as the intersection between autonomy, patients' rights, and the practice of medicine. He's an avid critical thinker, philosopher, and very keen to share and discuss academic ideas. He plays video games, a part-time DJ at private events, a twin dad, and loves his kids to bits. Thank you very much, Dr. Ofunne, for being here with us. I'm sorry, I've just been reminded that I have to put on my video. Apologies to everybody. And we'd love our lecturer speakers rather to also put on their videos while that is going on. So without wasting much of our time, we would want to speak, we want Dr. Ajuwon to start this webinar by speaking to us about his work with just generally speaking to us about his work with AI and what he's been doing so far and how he thinks that AI affects medical research, medical outcomes, and things like that. So Dr. Ajuwon, please.
We can't hear anything.
Dr. Ajuwon, I hope there's no technical difficulty.
Dr. John, we can't hear you.
Apologies, everybody. I think Dr. Ajuwon is experiencing some technical difficulty. He'll be joining us right back. I think he's logged out, but he'll join us right back. Apologies.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Good
Yes, sir.
afternoon. We can hear you.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, we can hear you.
So is Dr. Juan presenting? Am I the only one who can hear him, or we are still stuck on his technology?
Yeah, we're still stuck on technology, unfortunately. So,
Um,
um,
may I suggest I start so we don't keep the audience waiting, if that's okay, or we can maybe have like an open house discussion if that's not feasible at this point. Maybe throw some questions open to the floor so that there's a collaborative discussion whilst we wait for Dr. Ajua.
we could start with an open house discussion because I would like Dr. Ajuwon to go first because it's 12 midnight where he is and he'd have to log off immediately after. So we don't
No,
take much of his time. That's why. But unfortunately,
no,
the
not a problem. I've got all day with you, so
okay,
I'm
thank you
patient.
very much. Thank you.
All right. And
So,
good afternoon, everyone. I'm sorry I didn't greet.
oh, please go ahead, Doctor.
I said no. I'm just saying good afternoon to everyone. I didn't say hello. I just started speaking. My apologies. Good afternoon.
Good
Okay, I
afternoon.
think Dr. Ajuwon is back on. Dr. Ajuwon, if you can hear us, it will be okay if you make your presentation without if you can speak to the presentation without projecting it. Maybe that's what is causing the technical issues. So we'll be fine with that if it's okay by you. While we wait for Dr. Ajuwon, I can start with asking a question. To Dr. Ofunne. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm sorry if I'm not. We see from your bio that you are both a medical doctor and okay, not exactly a lawyer, but you are also you also have an LLM in medical law. So that means that you have a lot to say on this topic from two different points of view. So without taking so much from your presentation, I just wanted to speak maybe very briefly as an opener, giving your extensive background on how we can integrate AI to, you know, reshape how we practice uh, or we integrate AI to the relationship with healthcare practitioners and patients, most especially from an ethics point of view.
Hi. Good afternoon once again. That's a very, in fact, I think your last statement actually was supposed to be my opening statement.
Oh,
Um, in addition to a legal background, there's also an ethics slash philosophy background somewhere there. And over the years, I've come to realize that ethics actually forms the bedrock of not just medicine but law as well. Ethics has to do with constructive rationalizations, where you think and come up with your best judgments based on principles, based on theories, and you arrive at a decision, something we call reflective equilibrium. And that's how laws or judgments are passed, basically. So, with that said, I find it very easy to integrate ethical and, of course, legal principles in medicine because there's a lot of decisions that need to be made. If time allows, I would be able to discuss extensively on my presentation how, first and foremost, we need to appreciate, what AI is. We need to appreciate the pros and the cons. We need to also appreciate the fact that AI is here to stay. So from that appreciation, then we now see how we can incorporate it into Medicare and of course, indeed, in all other spheres. And I stand corrected, but I think medicine is actually one of the fields that is lagging behind. Most other fields have incorporated AI into their sphere. However, it's not just all doom and gloom because we've had a history in our profession in medicine that is where we've done things unethically. And in my slides, you'll see where I reference some of the experiments that have been done on humans in the past. So having that background, we now know that we need to regulate. We can't just introduce AI without some form of regulation. We can't introduce AI without appreciating its limits. We can't incorporate AI without appreciating what it can do for us and how we can protect our patients, because that is the doctor's primary responsibility, patient protection. So I think, I don't know if I've answered your question, but ethics, law, medicine, all three, all parts of a tripod, and appreciating all three would help us in not just AI, but of course in other areas of Medicare. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor. We'll talk more on that when you begin to present and give your presentation. But I see that Dr. Ajiwon is right back on here with us. And then if you can hear us, I would like him to start his presentation. Unfortunately, we may not be able to project his presentation, but I'm sure that he'll do justice speaking to it. Dr. Ajiwon, please, if you can hear us. Okay, unfortunately, we're still back right at our problem. Let Dr. Ofunne, I think we will just have to start with you so that we do not keep our audience waiting. I will just project your presentation right away and we can start. A couple of seconds, please.
Whilst we're waiting, how much time do I have?
30 minutes, please.
Oh, okay. I'm ready when you are. Let's know when I can.
Can everybody see my screen? I think I'm ready.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Dr. Ofunne, please. Yes.
Okay. Hello once again. Today we'll be talking about a principlist approach to artificial intelligence in healthcare. I chose this topic because primarily I try to incorporate ethical principles, in my rationalizations and in my eventual decision-making process. So if I'm going to crave your indulgence, you'll find that I did elaborate on some ethical principles. I introduced some legal ideologies, and at the end of the presentation, I tried to put everything together. So the objective or the format of my talk would be um, unpacking some of the issues I identified in healthcare using ethical principles and theories. I looked at AI in medical law, and I tried to talk about or focus on malpractice and negligence. Essentially, as well, I we basically we need to appreciate to regulate using laws and ethics. And lastly, the guidelines preamble. So diving straight into the talk proper. Um, the first major slide we have here. Next slide, please. Moderator, next slide. Slide 3.
Yes, please, 1 minute. I will do that. I'm having a bit of technical issues on my end. Sorry about that.
Okay. The next slide, whilst we're waiting for the moderator, we're looking at the numbers in terms of US dollars. This is important because we all know that once something has to do with money, there's going to be a lot of things involved. But today we talk about big pharma, US dollars. So if there's money involved, we need to be extra careful. Are we talking just about money or are we talking about medicine now? So we need to also, um, as at 2021, AI had a market value in healthcare, that is, of 11 billion US dollars. And in 4 years from now, or rather 6 years from now, there's a projection of almost $200 billion. So we're looking at some 200% now, 2,000%. The math people will be able to calculate that for us. You can see the jump, which means money has been thrown into it. Everybody's jumping towards AI. And now doctors, medicine, we want to go into AI, but we need to also realize that it's not just about the money. 20% of healthcare organizations have already adopted AI in some way or the other. The return on investments within 14 months, like if you invest in AI now, what this means is by December of next year, you may get your money back 300%. This was a study done by COSI this year. I got this information from Castro. I think this was a YouTube podcast, and it says that by 2026, the market for robot-assisted surgery may be worth 20 billion US dollars. However, by 2030, 90% of nursing tasks will still be done by humans. So, um, what that means is 10%, if we want to extrapolate the nursing numbers into medicine, 10% of the tasks will be worth about 20 billion USD. So somebody may say, okay, why don't we make it 50% so it's worth, it's just a projection. But this is to set the tone for what is to come. Next slide, please. Um, what are some of the cons off the bat? Implementation costs. If we're going to like do AI like we see in the movies, we need to look at the fact that it's the implementation cost. We need to be very aware of data privacy and confidentiality issues. Who has access to patients' data, for instance? Italy, sometime last year, briefly banned ChatGPT, citing security issues. I think we all are familiar with ChatGPT, and I think I'll give you some experience with my medical students, hypothetically and in reality, in subsequent slides. Erosion of the reflective practitioner. Medicine is about a reflective, compassionate, thinking practitioner. These days, if you can type symptoms and patient data onto a computer and you get treatment plans and all that, so we may lose some of that reflection. Um, there's also the algorithmic bias. What this simply means is the AI algorithms or the AI would give predictions based on input. So, for instance, if you have a lot of Caucasian data, into your AI systems, chances are you would have less predictive values or predictors for non-Caucasian diseases. I say this because we all know that hypertension, for instance, is predominantly in African populations. So if you use an AI system that has been programmed like that in a Caucasian environment, we may have bias. You know, um, lack of standardization in data collection, annotation and model training. If anyone clicks on that link, you're going to find a very interesting story. In Kenya, this year, people were selling data online to access doctor appointments. What that means is you sell your data, you get money, or you'll be able to see a doctor. I don't know. I don't have a lot of details about that, but it's a tad cringeworthy if you ask me, off the bat. Like for you to be able to see a doctor, and it's usually targeted towards people who can't afford to pay for doctor services. So someone came up with this genius idea to say, sell your data because remember we need data for the algorithms that AI is developed upon. So sell it to us. We will use your data to develop algorithms. Then you can see a doctor for free or for cheap. Um, Imagine all the autonomy issues and stuff there. Next slide, please. Um, some of the other issues we'll be looking at, I think we already spoke about bias. The errors, of course, AI is not perfect, and we usually they call those errors hallucinations. AI is a complex problem. And complex problems in philosophy are problems that, there's an interconnection, a myriad of issues. We need to understand all the interconnectivities before we can actually effectively deploy AI. Of course, safety, lack of governance. We're going to see in slides where even in America, they struggle with governance and legal policies for AI. In Africa, for instance, essentially, colleagues, these slides were developed for an African Medical Congress presentation I had some few weeks ago. So I'm looking at AI essentially from our perspective in sub-Saharan Africa. Okay, um, we look at AI and primary healthcare, the priority. If we look at take Lagos for instance, or take any part of Nigeria or Africa, is that priority when we look at primary healthcare? If somebody says let's put $200 billion or naira, for instance, is it really going to give us return in terms of patient value? Um, of course, liability, malpractice, and negligence. We're going to look at things like duty of care, standard of care, and contractual issues in in malpractice and negligence. In the next slide, I think I'll be a bit faster than the moderator to save time. Um, in the next slide, we're looking at other points of notes, training times. If we're rolling out AI, we need to train doctors, we need to train nurses, we also need to train patients or educate patients now to respond to that. Um, the evidence and anecdotes and empirical issues. Are we really sure of what we are doing? How reliable are these things? I think most of these things have been spoken about before. The reflective practitioner. Can health practitioners, for instance, override AI? Let's say you type in all your data and AI gives you like a path to follow, a diagnosis and management plan. And as a reflective practitioner, this may not be wrong. So where do we draw the line? Where do we say, no, I will use AI because it was developed by 200 professors over 5 years? But no, I am seeing this patient in front of me. And that is medicine. Medicine is not cut and paste. You need to see your patient. You need to analyze the patient in front of you. Which professionals or which professions should use AI? Is it doctors or nurses or pharmacists? All of them, and to what degree or standards? Um, of course, we also know that across the world, and indeed even different parts of Africa, like maybe the technology available in South Africa, for instance, may not be available in Djibouti. So when we roll out AI in Africa or in African med spaces, we need to be conversant with the various or the variants of standard of care. Um, and in our next slide, I'm looking at the erosion of furnaces, precision surgeries. I touched a bit on precision surgeries. We all know surgeries where you analyze your patient in front of you and you can make decisions if something goes south. Well, AI, like if we roll out AI for surgeries, would we be able to regulate this? Um, I think I'll jump to the last one. AI dumping. In ethics, in moral philosophy, we have a thing called ethics dumping where it was found out over the years, and it's a big issue now in many parts of the world. It was found out that most researchers, like in the first world, will come to Africa to do research that they would not otherwise do in their jurisdictions. So we discovered, or we came up with a concept called ethics dumping. which of course is illegal and very unethical. Now, are we going to find where people would dump their AI technologies on us and say you have to use it and stuff like that? So we really need to be careful. If we're going to roll out AI, it has to be our AI. It has to be based on our patients and our algorithms and not hand-me-downs. Um, the next slide is a very interesting one. It's a hypothetical scenario. Um, um, Imagine you tell your medical students or even your younger doctors, you have a 6 7 year old male patient with XYZ symptoms. What's your management plan? And some genius young doctor or medical student or old doctor for that matter would say, I plug the patient to an AI based system which will do an algorithm based diagnosis, an algorithm based management plan, an algorithm based prescription, and an algorithm based follow up. The next steps in the management plan will be determined by algorithm based prognosis. Um, so this is actually something that we need to be careful about, and we know how students know how like the easy way out. I'm sure if AI had come in when I was a medical student, definitely that's something I know I could have done. But why are we here? Why are we discussing AI? We've allowed AI to permeate our health space without regulation. Um, there's inadequate legislation for AI, or at least one that is homegrown or African based. We've allowed it to flourish without ethics. We have clinical research, pandemic ethics. Do we have or need AI ethics? I think that's a question I think the House should answer, hopefully, at the end of the talk. Um, with something seen as a future and present like AI, should we really continue the status quo ante? What indeed is the way forward? Um, so, some of the critical reflections, are we rolling out AI because we want to improve efficiency, or basically because we want to keep up with the trend? You know, it seems like it's fashionable to have AI systems in place. Or are we essentially outsourcing medicine to AI? Is this the future of Medicare? Any opportunity cost of improving quality is in quotes. Essentially, what are we sacrificing here? And if there's any economist in the house, you know what opportunity cost is. What are we sacrificing? So if we roll out billions to improve AI, what is the other side of the coin? Things like reflective practitioner, things like, so those are some of the things we need to look at. And in Africa, we need to look at the socioeconomic determinants of health. We need to look at our unequal disease burden with other parts of the world. We need to look at our leadership issues, our political environment. That's always going to be a problem. We need to look at our debt burden. If somebody says, okay, the Federal Ministry of Health in Nigeria, you need to put 10% or 20% of your budget to AI, you know, what exactly are we going to sacrifice? Health education and budget. Now, what really is at stake in AI? You see, I'll just leave it. I think I'll summarize this: protecting patients. You can see, if you notice, that is bolder than the others. We really need to remember that AI, it's about, or medicine is about protecting our patients. Okay. Um, and lastly, what do we want to be remembered for 100 years from now? Do we want to be remembered as the generation that rolled out AI and sacrificed our patients in trying to look cool? Next slide. Most importantly, colleagues, most importantly, do no harm. So I've said it in French as well. That's French thing that says, again, I repeat, again, I say, do no harm. So for anyone here or any organization here or in the future that is considering this, do no harm. Some interesting parallels. I will just be brief here, but maybe you can ask questions later or read about them. Between 1932 and 72, in America, some black patients, African Americans, whatever we want to call them, were subjected to this experiment where they were knowingly infected with syphilis, and they wanted, or the researchers or the scientists or the doctors, they wanted to see the natural progression of syphilis. There was a cure already for syphilis, which is penicillin, but they used these people as an experiment. They wanted to, so they were literally human guinea pigs. So that is actually, I brought it. I think it will interest the House to know that if I think it's the Obama administration or the Bush administration actually paid compensation to many of the descendants of these people, you know. And it's very interesting why I brought it in. When we roll out AI, do we really understand it enough or want to use our patients, in quotes, to do medical experiments, as it were. Um, I think we can skip the next slide. We can skip this slide. Next slide. When we look at, like from the example I gave, have we really learned anything from history? Can we look at the future without looking at our past? So I'm looking at AI as the future, but where are we coming from in terms of experiments? Where are we coming from in terms of patient protection? Where are we coming from in terms of introducing new things into our med space? Should we make the same mistakes? What indeed can we do differently? So these are questions that we use in moral philosophy and of course in law to be able to, when we answer these questions, we now have an idea where we want to go and what we should be doing. So let's look at some of the ethical principles quickly. I think I have a few slides here. Informed consent using AI, should we make it implied or documented? What of incompetent patients who can make decisions? What are the material risks of AI? Material risks, I just want to point out to the house, in medical law, we consider material risk as those important risks in any procedure or treatment that the patient should know about. It may make them change their mind if they are aware, and the doctor should feel that this is important enough for the patient to know. So do we know enough? So if you do not know your material risks, your consent process is deemed invalid. There was a study, there was a landmark case in South Africa where, because of material risks, the patients argued successfully that the doctor assaulted them, didn't give them all the information. So if we treat patients with AI tomorrow, do we know enough? Are we going to be exposing ourselves to litigation? There's also the data protection, which we spoke about. Truth telling is part of autonomy. Do we know what is the truth about AI? How much do we know to inform patients? Who really gains in AI use? And that's a very important question. AI, do we want to be fancy or we want to help our patients? Effective communication. I think the next presenter, I did hear something about language models. LLM is not masters of laws, it's large language models and some terminologies in AI. How much do we know about this and to be able to inform our patients? Next slide. We look at patients' competence to make informed choices. Um, One of the hallmarks of informed consent is competence. Are the patients really autonomous? So I think I just need to point out something. You may be competent enough to make a decision, but is it really your choice? Because the doctor or the nurse is there, and you have to agree so that they don't victimize you or you don't offend them. So we need to be careful when we say no, the patient is competent enough. It can be argued that it wasn't an autonomous decision. In terms of beneficence, what is the risk versus benefit analysis? Who gains? Is there room for paternalism? In terms of non-maleficence, do not incapacitate, do not cause offense. If we do not roll out AI properly, are we still together? I just realized the slides are not moving. Hello?
Yes, we are with you.
Okay. I think I'm on slide 23 to save time. I just kept on skipping slides because I still have about 10 more slides to go and I don't want to bore the audience too much. Slide 23, the next slide. Um, the next slide talks about AI and justice. The human rights angle and access to new technology. The UDHR, United the UDHR articles actually speak about access to new technology as a human right. So that's also another angle to look at. If we deny the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that is, if we deny our patients the advantages of AI, we may be denying them some of their human rights. However, can AI guarantee human rights? How much will AI improve access to care and service? Can AI guarantee justice in scarce resources? If we want to choose or say AI, that justice in terms of scarcity as we know it is flawed, then will AI fix it or will education? You see, in Medicare, we essentially deal with scarce resources. So if we want to say maybe you have two kidney transplant patients, you only have one kidney, who gets it? One of the problems we find in bioethics is there's a flawed decision making process because of a poor understanding of ethics in determining who gets it. So if we do not understand the basics of ethics, remember our algorithms may also be flawed because garbage in, garbage out. So we now are sourcing technically decision making principles to AI. So are we going to really trust that? It's something we need to think about. I would keep the virtue, the moral philosophy part because of time. If there is time, I'll be very, very happy to come back. However, we can go to slide 34 so that we can talk about the way forward. If I have time, please let me know. I'll come back and do justice to these slides. But I just want the house not to get too bored with all the questions I'm asking. What about this? What about that? Somebody, I'm sure, trusting my Niger people, somebody I'm sure is already saying, waiting be the way forward. What's next? What are we? So let's look at some of the roadmaps and guidelines I try to come up with. Slide 35, please. Well, it's too bad. There's also a question there. What is wrong with our practice today? When we look around, whether it be Nigeria, America, the UK, what are the things we say are wrong with our practice? From Medicare to nursing to pharmacy, will AI solve this? Is it worth the investment? Can we afford it, or do we need to wait for first world to outsource to us? Remember AI dumping, dependence, and ethics washing. Is the issue more accurate diagnosis or more access? And this is very important. We have a cliche saying that Niger doctors are some of the best doctors. I mean, we hold our own anywhere in the world we go to. We are really well trained. So if we look at our systems, is our diagnosis, how flawed are they? So when we want to like make decisions, do we say, okay, if people argue, say AI would make your diagnosis more accurate? I don't really think, especially in many parts of the world, our problem is diagnosis. Our problem is access. So we need to also look at how much access will AI give us, and maybe that's where we need to focus to say, okay, we are rolling out AI because we've shown, or studies have shown it to guarantee access and not necessarily make diagnosis better. Most importantly, do we think in an environment of human rights issues and poor ethics awareness and uptake, AI technology will thrive? This is no shades. Some of us, if we look around us, there's a lot of human rights issues. There's a lot of so do we really think that if we roll out AI when we have such problems, it's going to thrive? So way forward is to first recognize AI for what it is at best. It's a health innovation. Then also we need to understand that much is still being developed and a lot still needs to be understood. So this slide, if you want to screenshot it, if you want to take a picture, we need to understand this. Everything I've spoken about all afternoon boils down to this slide. What is it? It's an innovation. A lot is still being developed. A lot still needs to be learned. So when we embrace this knowledge, okay, when we understand this knowledge, then the next slides become salient. Slide 37 will introduce us to the concept of, therefore, I submit AI use in healthcare should form part of ongoing R&D, research and development, under the aegis of clinical innovation. In medical law, clinical innovation has its own format. There's a way we roll out innovations or clinical innovations, and these are the principles. There should be a good hypothesis on positive uses. And of course, I've severally outlined some of these, make diagnosis faster, easier. What is the risk versus benefit analysis at every stage in its use, from history taking to treatment to diagnosis to surgery? We need to do an RVB analysis at every stage. We also need expert guidance on ongoing moral competence and phronesis on the part of health practitioners. Um, we need to also come back to informed consent. Informed consent is also another pillar of clinical innovation. So all these things, hypothesis, risk versus benefit analysis, expert guidance, informed consent, these are the pillars of clinical innovation. And remember, colleagues, that competence may not always mean autonomy. We've got 2 more slides. If anyone is impatient, 2 more slides. I promise I'm done. Next slide, please. Um, Also on the guiding principles, we can also choose to roll out AI in antecedent problem areas such as new drug discovery, cancer care, HIV, etc. So we could also look at to say, okay, instead of rolling out AI generally, is that for me? Okay, instead of rolling out AI generally, let's focus on areas that we know we need improvement on: cancer care, HIV, new drug discovery. I think some of the slides we skipped, there's AI can also help with new drug discovery. We need to also engage the stakeholders, what we call dramatis personae. And the stakeholders, we need to engage our patients. So when we talk of stakeholders, we shouldn't always only think about the doctors and the nurses and the tech geeks. Even our patients, we need to also engage them. We need to have ethics committees. I doubt if there are very many hospitals in sub-Saharan Africa that have ethics committees. I think South Africa, I rolled out one of the first ethics committees in present-day Namibia. And these are things I'll be very, very happy to understand the situation on the ground back home to see what we can do going forward. We need to look at ongoing ethics training, especially for programmers, clinicians, and developers of AI. I already spoke about the garbage in, garbage out concept. We need to avoid virtue signaling. Virtue signaling is where we talk about, yes, we rolled out AI in XYZ hospital. We have the best AI system in Lagos. I know my Niger people may want to say, but it could be virtue signaling if it doesn't follow the ethical principles or legal principles as already outlined. We need to remember our Declaration of Helsinki, which culminated in the formation of good clinical principles. Some of the things on good clinical principles: understanding or appreciating autonomy, informed consent, and stuff like that. In conclusion, colleagues, laws or regulations will not help AI use. Ethics holds the key. After all, ethics is law that went to morality school, and we cannot discuss laws without discussing ethics. This is a coinage from a paper I'm writing presently. I said ethics is law that went to morality school. And we can't discuss laws without discussing ethics because they basically have the same principles. Indeed, when we look at most of the issues highlighted, things like hallucinations, bias, harms, the solution is moral competence and ethics. We can have soft laws as prelude to codified statutes and regulations. Soft laws basically mean policies. So one of the things we need to look at, let's say in our sub-Saharan African space, in our Niger space, we need to look at policies. We need to develop policies that are founded on principles of bioethics. So from those policies, then we can actually now have AI laws. Some of the slides I skipped, colleagues, you'll find out that even in the so-called first world, they still do not have codified laws and regulations when it comes to AI. Most of them are still being developed. So this is actually something we can tap in Africa to say we actually were the first continent, or we are the first country in Nigeria to come up with codified statutes, codified laws for AI. It's doable, and I'm very happy to sit down with my people and talk. Of course, we need to constantly and periodically review all our guidelines, as well as research and development. So essentially, I'm saying we need to do M&E. So we can't sit back and relax. If we come up with policies today, in by 2030, for instance, or even by next year, there may be new information, new technology. So we have to keep on revising and keeping up with the times. And I think at this point, the next slide, which is my last slide, say with all of these, colleagues, it will be my pleasure, with all of what we've spoken about, all these in the equation, it will be my pleasure to state that indeed we can move from AI, which is artificial intelligence, to BI, which is beneficial intelligence, which I think we should go to. The idea is to move from AI to BI. And I submit. I thank you for listening, and thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ofunne. It was, although you went through it very quickly. Would have loved to, take time to explore your presentation in depth. Before I go on, I will just state that unfortunately, Dr. Ajuwon will not be able to join us, unfortunately. I'm so sorry that it had to turn out this way, because I know that we would have been looking forward to what he had to say, most especially as someone who worked directly with AI to achieve health outcomes. But we hope that maybe sometime in future we can bring him on again. So that said, I will go back to Dr. Ofunne. Perhaps the parts that we had not talked about, we can go back and visit them more in depth, or we can just proceed to the question and answer segment. And if we have anybody who has questions to ask, they can, ask the questions. But I would love to defer to Dr. Ofunne and ask if he thinks that we should go back and, all the things we're not able to touch on, we should do that, or we should just go straight to the question and answer segment.
Before I respond, I just want to say that I think you should have told me that I had more time. This is something I'm very passionate about, because I was rushing, because I didn't want to impinge upon Dr. Juwan's time, and I also didn't want to bore the audience. So I would have, if it's not too late, and if the house doesn't mind, maybe I should run through some of the slides I skipped, because some of the questions that may be asked could be things that are in those slides. So, what's your take on that? I think I'll spend another 5 max 10 minutes on those slides. Then I'll be very happy to engage questions and network and meet people as well.
Yeah, we can go back to the slides. Thank you. And
All,
apologies for the, we can go back to the slides.
all right. Let's see. I think we can start from AI and moral philosophy, slide 24, I think. All right. So essentially, in ethics, we've got our principles. So those are the principles I tried to run through. I don't know if I did justice because of time, but there are 4 principles. We look at autonomy, we look at beneficence, we look at non-maleficence, and we look at justice. Now, under moral philosophy, we're looking at things like virtue ethics. We're looking at Kantian deontology, and those are the 2 major ones that I discovered to be very apt in terms of AI. So I'll just run through them briefly. I'll give slide 25. As the name implies, virtue ethics, virtues. What are your virtues? A virtuous woman. I'm sure in the Bible we hear lots of things like a virtuous woman, or even in all our holy books, a virtuous woman does this, a virtuous woman does that. So I'll tell you a story. One of my profs told me years ago, and I think this is also in some textbooks. If truth telling, you must tell the truth. I think no, I think that may be more in the, but we can use it here. Truth telling. So a known killer, a lady was running away from a known killer. This guy has guns and knives, and everybody knows he's a killer. And so he runs into your house, and then a few minutes, she runs into your house rather, and a few seconds later, the killer comes and asks you, "Where's that lady?" Now you must tell the truth. They say you get, so you shouldn't lie. However, um, if you tell the truth and say the lady is inside my house, the guy goes in and kills her. If you lie, the woman is saved. So what do you do? And the rationalization becomes you can only tell the truth to those who are deserving of the truth, which is very good. And this is actually one of the reasons I like ethics and law, where you rationalize to say, in as much as they say, tell the truth at all times. But a killer, for instance, or if harm is going to happen, then the patient or the person doesn't deserve to know the truth. And that introduces us to what we call therapeutic privilege. Um, we must tell our patients the truth. I think in when I introduced autonomy, I talked about truth telling, truth telling. However, there are certain instances in medicine where we are allowed to withhold the truth when we know that the patient may be harmed. Like if we have a suicidal patient, do you tell that patient some truth that you feel reasonably so will make that patient finish the job, as it were? So you have to hold information. So how much do we hold back? Because we need to tell our patients the truth about AI, but how much do we hold back? Okay, then we look at trust. Patient, that's the fiduciary nature of healthcare. Our patients should trust us. We look at moral competence. I think I've elaborated too much on this, but moral competence has to do with our stuff. For those of us who were in med school, your clinical knowledge and of course your ethics knowledge. In a nutshell, when you have moral competence, it's I've codified it from studies to actually mean both of them: our clinical and our bioethical or non-clinical knowledge. um, Compassionate AI. Can we train? Compassion is also another virtue. So these are some of the virtues I'm talking about: trust, fiduciary, truth telling. These are virtues. Okay. So compassion, and I put it in italics. Can we outsource or train algorithms to be empathetic? That's a very important question, which I think the house should be able to answer by now. Do we think AI is can be trained to be that? Even if just imagine robots. We've all seen sci-fi movies. They can probably do a lot of things, but they can't be us. Okay. We look at wokeness. I put that in brackets. My teenage kid will tell me it's wokeness, fashion, style, the fad versus virtues. So when we roll out AI, are we rolling it out because it's cool, or we're rolling it because it's really going to help our patients? Next slide. AI and deontology. Basically, it has to do with duty. Okay. Are we using our patients as a means to an end or as an end? Or are we using AI as a means to an end or as an end? Essentially, when we use something as an end in moral philosophy, that is good. But when we use something or someone as a means to an end, I follow lots of social media stuff in okay, I'm not going to call the country this time, where they say a lot of people, you could maybe date someone because you are hungry. So people have to go into relationships because of food. Is it really love, or you're using the person to get food? So essentially, if it is the latter, you're using that person as a means to an end. You're using that person to end hunger. I don't know if that's a very good analogy, but are we using our patience to learn more about AI? Are we using our patience to feel cool? Are we actually using AI to make our patients better? So if we're using AI as a means to an end, that end becomes our patient. I don't know if it's clear. So what we use to achieve something, we literally use. So AI can be seen as a means to an end, where the patient is the end in terms of if the outcome is good. Okay. All right. Next slide. Yes, and this is actually maybe we can spend a few seconds here. AI and medical legal jurisprudence. Codified laws are still in emergence, even in so-called first world. Some authorities have espoused that they've, come up with. Should we have separate AI health statutes and regulations? Like in South Africa, we've got the National Health Act, which is a statute in terms of how healthcare is regulated. Some people have actually said, should we have National AI Health Act, for instance? Because AI is something totally different. We're struggling to see how we can incorporate it into our usual statutes. Um, some of our legal concerns are universal in terms of justice and stuff. However, the regulations may differ from region to region or from country to country. What are these concerns? We need to come up, we need to think about when we want to look at medical legal jurisprudence. We need to understand that justice is universal, but regulations are not universal. Okay, we need to look at intellectual property issues, the emergence of big IT. Okay, now I said think big pharma. I think I already introduced this earlier. big pharma, I mean, pharmacy, medicine, money. With if you look at how what we call pre-qualification of medicines, WHO pre-qualification and stuff. These are some of the. If we go deep into this, we're looking at one of the reasons we don't have medicines, what we call drugs in Nigeria. One of the reasons we don't have meds as much as we want to have them is because of things like pre-qualification. There are lots of barriers into accessing medicines. Okay, and that is one of the there's like a cartel, a big pharma cartel. So I'm guessing, I'm suspecting, with all those monies I spoke about in the first slide, I definitely am sure that there will be big IT, like big pharma, people who keep AI. Before you can get access to AI, you must promise us 1 billion every month and stuff like that. Okay. We need to look at accountability and governance. We need to think about COVID times. Sorry, there was supposed to be an A there, accountability. One of the problems, because I advised the WHO during COVID, it was a huge problem. We came up with all sorts of regulations in this part of the world, and of course in most parts of the world, but we had a problem with accountability, governance, and regulations of those. There was different interpretations. Um, what we also discovered, and studies are still ongoing, we had some of the best brains. If we look at our Nigerian space, for instance, we had some of the best clinicians, all PhD in clinical epidemiology, PhD in virology. But how many philosophers, how many bioethicists were in those panels? Okay, so when we look at this, I call it the pandemic, which is pandemite. All right. So then of course malpractice and negligence. This is the main thing. For those who may not be aware, malpractice and negligence are like brothers. They basically mean the same thing with just a twist. Um, Negligence is like the name implies. You make a mistake. You omit something, usually done inadvertently. In a nutshell, I'm trying to be simplistic here. Malpractice is like the elder brother, where you deliberately do something and a patient is harmed. In both of them, a patient is harmed. Okay, so in negligence, it's about, okay, I made a mistake. You omitted. It's usually milder in quotes. Malpractice is deeper. You know what is wrong, and you still went ahead and do it, or rather, you know what is right, you went ahead and did not do it. So in both of them, a patient is harmed. Okay. Now the test for next slide, please. The test for malpractice and negligence is reasonableness and foreseeability. So a court will say, for instance, I just want to say this for doctors and nurses in the house, clinicians generally in the house: harm being done to a patient, okay, or a mistake is not necessarily malpractice or negligence. How the courts interpret it, they look at the foreseeability, they look at the reasonableness, like how foreseeable was that harm or was that mistake you made. If it is deemed that it's not something that is, you couldn't foresee it, it's a new thing, it's not something that is generalized, a reasonable doctor in that scope is not going to make that same mistake. um, Already a reasonable doctor in your scope would probably make the same mistake, then is deemed as not to be malpractice or negligence. Okay, so these are some technical issues. Okay, so next slide. I hope I was able to talk a bit about that. Um, so when we use AI, why I'm introducing this is when we use AI and a patient is harmed. So the court will come and say, okay, was that harm foreseeable? Did we foresee that AI or that algorithm could have made that mistake? Okay, so some of the things that is new. I'm just looking at how things could come up in the future. Dr. John, did you foresee that what you did would cause harm using your AI system? Then another thing I also looked at is who is responsible? Are you going to sue the doctor? Are you going to sue the AI system? Are you going to sue the developer? So these are some of the things we need to think about. And when it gets technical, it really does get technical. So I may sue if I'm a patient and a doctor harms me using AI. And somebody says, okay, sue the doctor. The doctor will say, no, don't sue me because somebody, the developer or the owner of the algorithm made me make the mistake. Sue that person. Or maybe there's some vicarious liability issues. But I don't want to go too deep. I just want us to think about when we want to sue or if we have to sue, who do we think of? So these are some of the things that need to be codified. okay, into statutes. These are some of the things that our policies and our codified statutes would have to look at. Okay, I think we can skip this slide. It's we can go to slide 30. I think I already spoke about this, so I'll be very brief. The test for malpractice and negligence. No, I think let's go back, please. Reasonableness and foreseeability. Will a reasonable practitioner foresee the harms and not only warn patients but take precautions against them? Can AI be reasonable? In quotes. What do we bench reasonableness in AI on? Because we bench reasonableness in like in a doctor. Say, okay, an average doctor in the same scope and practice as this doctor we are accusing. Okay, that is reasonableness. So what do we bench reasonableness in AI? What is an average AI, for instance? Will AI in Canada be the same AI in America or in Nigeria? Some questions here will be, like in law, we say, will a reasonable doctor have foreseen that? So this is a hypothetical question. Will a reasonable AI foresee, fill in the blanks there. So these are some of the things that I'm coming up with. I'm just thinking about to say it's going to be very interesting. Maybe not in this part of the world where we are not very litigious, but in first world, there will come a time where people may start suing robots. People may start suing the developers of robots and stuff. Next slide, slide 31. Possible harms. Remember, I spoke about malpractice and negligence. There must be harm. So possible harms, you can sue to say my dignity was impugned upon. Okay. And one of the ways you can do that is maybe your privacy is impugned. Okay, so they're now told, based on the fact that maybe there was no data security, the whole world now knows I have syphilis. My dignity has been harmed. So you can sue for that. You can sue for privacy. You can sue because you're not being treated fairly or equally. You can sue, of course, from loss of life, or of course, usually it's your next of kin and your estate. Okay. You can sue from harms from algorithmic bias. Remember, I spoke about bias earlier to say AI systems will give predictions based on what you put inside. So if you use a predictive system, maybe from America, for instance, for diseases that are not very common here, chances are that there may be errors. This is just also very hypothetical. And now, when there's an error, the patient is harmed. Maybe the diagnosis or the management plan may be suboptimal. So those are some of the harms. Basically, I'm giving the lawyers in the house or the researchers or the students in the house things that they can develop pieces or papers on. Okay, dignity or dignitas versus AI use, privacy versus AI use, loss of life. People have been known to sue for death of their relatives. So who are we suing this time? Next slide. In the mitigation of malpractice and negligence in AI use, consent is key. Proper informed consent with material risk, competence, and autonomy all carefully laid out. That's consent, also helps with mitigating bias in the algorithmic bias. Let me just come back to this. Consent is key. Remember, colleagues, in my blitz through earlier, I spoke about material risks. So consent, the courts have argued, or the courts have decided that if the material risks of a treatment plan are not elaborated or elucidated to the patient, that the consent process is flawed. And now the patient has a case for things like assault and other forms of harms. Okay. So, how do we mitigate? I'm telling you that to mitigate malpractice and negligence, consent is key. And in consent, you must talk about the material risks. You must make sure the patient is competent and autonomous. So, these are some of the things we need to remember. So, even when we are rolling out AI, and I'm sure in some hospitals in Lagos, in Abuja, we already have some algorithms, some AI systems already making predictions. Tell them that they need to have proper consent policies, proper consent processes where material risks and stuff are there. And like I said before, I'm very, very happy to network and discuss ideas, and of course, learn. Learn about things that need to also improve upon in my jurisdiction as well. Um, but essentially, I'm very happy to network and meet fellow practitioners and fellow philosophers and stuff. Um, I think the last slide would be liability. We're still on liability in AI use. Will the proximate cause of liability be the AI system or the practitioner? Proximate cause of liability. Let me put it this way. If if for instance I sent somebody to go and slap Mr. John, right? So I technically, the laws interpret me as the assaulter. If you watched movies, that's why the person who says, okay, they hired somebody to assassinate another person, they also go to jail. So the person who pulled the trigger and the person who sent the trigger puller, they also suffer consequences. So, but the person who pulled the trigger, for instance, is a proximate cause of death or is a proximate cause of harm. So that's what I mean here. So who is the person who we blame? Let's say I have a practice in Lagos and I use an AI system and the patient is harmed. So what is the proximate cause? Is it the AI system or is it me that employed the use of AI system in my practice? Um, can we blame the algorithm or do we as practitioners take the blame? I think it's pretty much a repetition of the earlier point. Can we also deploy AI when we least understand or not fully understand the limitations thereof? This is also another very important question. How much do we know about AI? Okay, it's a bit unfortunate we are coming back, but at least I think if you look at the roadmap I gave, if you look at the guidelines I gave, I think all these are covered. We need to understand it for what it is, and we need to understand that there's a lot of things that we use it in clinical innovation. And one of the ways we can mitigate harm is in using problem areas. We're not going to use AI for things that we're doing well on, or we shouldn't, or that's just my take. But if we can see, because that's why we need to do a risk versus benefit analysis. If we see that we are on 90% on something, so the answer may not be let's not use AI. Why not get to 95? Why not get to 100? However, for now, whilst we're still developing, whilst we're still learning, there are areas where we are on 5%. So if we can get even 10 or 15%, yes, let's do that because I mean, half a loaf is better than none. That's essentially what I'm saying. I think at this point, all the slides that were skipped, apart from the ones that were blitzed through, colleagues, I will thank you once again for listening. I appreciate your time. I submit.
Thank you very much, Doctor. We appreciate your time, your knowledge, and your willingness to share with us. It was a very, very interesting session. I wish it could go on because as you were talking, I had a lot of questions. A lot of things were popping into my head, and I kept asking myself, are we really ready for this AI? I've come to my own conclusion, we're not, but that's very, very subjective. And different people may see different ways and say, okay, why don't we start doing something or see how we can, implement it. No matter how little it is, let's see what we can do, right? But my own biases and my whatever I have in mind, that's one thing on its own. But I want to throw it open to the house. Does anybody have questions? Do we have observations? Do we have comments to make? What do we feel about integrating AI in healthcare delivery? So I'm leaving the floor open to everybody. If you have any sort of comments, questions, your takes on this, what you think about the okay, I see someone has raised their hand. You can just unmute, and Priscilla, you can just unmute and talk to us about what you think. Thank you.
Okay, good evening, everyone, and thank you very much, sir, for that beautiful presentation. I have a question, and it is in regards to informed consent. You mentioned that mentioning the material risks is very important. However, earlier you also made mention of truth telling. So my question is, what if one of the material risk does not necessarily benefit the patients if you tell them? So how do you balance truth telling and laying out all material risk to the patients?
Thank you. Do I respond now or take all the questions? Do I respond to this one?
Since nobody's hand is up, let's
All right.
just
Okay. Hi, Priscilla. I believe that's Priscilla that just asked.
yes, please.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Thanks. That means you listened. So I was beginning to think I was speaking to myself. Um, I think we speak about two very different but similar, or two differently similar concepts. Now, if I want to operate or do a procedure or treat a patient or something invasive on patient A, the law or the courts have argued that if I do not tell the patient everything about that maybe surgery I want to do on that patient, then I have not respected that patient's autonomy in terms of that procedure. So I violated that patient, and the consent process is deemed invalid. Okay, and there are penalties for that. Now, usually where we have to withhold information based on therapeutic privilege, it's usually for non-invasive things. Maybe we have a diagnosis, we just came up with a diagnosis and our patient is suicidal, all right? And then we need to withhold that information based on beneficence. So technically, there are two different things. One is an invasive therapy where maybe we're doing a surgical operation, and another is usually non-invasive where we have a patient usually stable or stable-ish in front of us, and we determine that telling that patient that thing may harm the patient. So we withhold, we justify it. Of course, you use your clinical records to justify that, what you are doing or why you are withholding. However, but if I have to operate on you, I cannot withhold any information because it means that your consent that you gave me to operate on you is based on a lie. And I'm glad it's a lady that is asking this question because I remember many years ago in Uniben when you meet a lady and you wear your nice jeans and you walk up to the lady and you say hello and I want to have a relationship with you, and later it found out that you lied about something. I know girls who will tell you the entire relationship is a lie, the foundation is a lie. No, no, you lied to me, so I'm not going to date you anymore, and stuff like that. So it's pretty much the same principle in terms of informed consent for a procedure or a surgery. Even on an experiment, you have to tell the patient all the material risks as much as you know them before the patient gives you consent to treat or to what's it called, to operate on them. But in this case, you've already have a clinically stable patient. You're not operating. You're not violating any bodily integrity. That is the term I'm looking for. So for me to operate on a patient, for me to be able to say I did not violate bodily integrity or body integrity, as it were, I need to give all the information so the patients give me permission to do that. But in the other case, I'm withholding some information. Essentially, I'm not violating any bodily integrity. I'm withholding information so I do not harm the patient. In informed consent for surgeries, if I withhold information in terms of material risk, I harm the patient. In the other one, if I withhold information, that's in therapeutic privilege, if I withhold information, I do not harm, I benefit the patient. I don't know if it's clear like that.
Yes, sir, it is. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank,
much.
thank you. I
We
think I'll prefer, sorry, I think I'll prefer Doc. Yes, Doc.
is noted, Dr. Ofunne. We have two more hands up. I'm just going to give them room to ask their questions, and that will be all because we It's almost 4:30 and I do not want to keep people beyond the time. Okay, 3 hands up. Okay, so these 3 people, we'll start with Obafela Richard Killer, then Damilare Adeoye, and Emmanuel Olulade. Sorry if I did not pronounce your name wrong. But in that order, can we just have the questions so that the doctor can answer them and we'll be done for today? Thank you.
Yes, good evening, Dr. Ofunne. It's been a pleasure listening to you, and so far everything you've spoken about resonates seriously with me. My name is Obafela Kila, and I'm actually the founder of a startup, an health tech startup, right? And we are working on an AI product as we speak for healthcare. And all the things you've mentioned, from the ethics, the truth telling, what we understand about AI, who to sue, malpractice, negligent, everything is something that really bothers on my mind, all the way up to data privacy. And I have 2 questions. The first question would be how I can connect with you, right? I would really love to be able to connect with you today and future purposes, right? So we can have better conversations and I can ask further questions. We can probably even work on some things together if you ever have the time. That's one, because I tried to search for you on LinkedIn, but the page I saw seems dormant, but I'm not sure if you're still using it. So I just had to ask that, oh, how can I connect with you? That's question 1. And my second question is how you see AI in healthcare in Africa. That's the aim of my startup. We want to push AI in Africa using big data. And one of my concerns are data privacy and law, right? The regulations, because most people are not used to this, and now that you are bringing this new thing, this foreign thing, especially what I want to build is something that connects patients worldwide. Now it has more data risks. We need more data security, and people are going to say lots of things are going to be said on this. Lots of people are going to try to push it away, just like when something new comes, everyone wants to push it away. And I have this problem with dependency. It's quite on my mind. What I mean by dependency is, what if people start to rely too much on AI? Because the part of AI I'm building works with electronic medical records, health records, data, and the likes. So doctors can use the software to attend to patients. The AI can help them to make more clinical-based decisions, right? It reduces their error, the error they make when they are seeing patients. It helps to identify the tests and the things that could be wrong with patients. But what if doctors or people in healthcare start to depend much on this? I think it's a real risk, and to this day, I still worry that I'm going to get to a stage where the laws are going to hold me down and I wouldn't be able to push back, because it's something that, most people try to reject new things because they don't understand it. They think, what if we're not ready for this? And it's actually a great concern. It's a good thing to think that way, because you might not be ready. But if you keep telling yourself, you're not ready, you're not ready, you're not ready, you're not ready, we'll be ready next year, we still need to do this, you're going to keep wasting more and more time. And so far, Nigeria, Africa is backward compared to other countries. And we need to push forward. Now there's AI. We have the opportunity to use AI to push the whole continent, not just a country, the whole continent forward. But are we going to let it stop us because we think, can we handle this? Why don't we make ourselves able to handle it? But so far, I have this security risk, I have this law risk, and I have the issues from healthcare, the dependency issues. So I want to ask you, that's my second question, what you think about, let me say, Nigeria as a country, not to even speak of Africa, just Nigeria as a country. How do you see AI in healthcare developing in Nigeria? Do you really see it having a chance? Is it something that you are actually interested in saying, okay, I want to see where AI will go, and I would really love to put this in practice. Let's set down the rules. Let's do the things we need to do. There will probably be mistakes. Let's make those mistakes and let's move forward. Of course, I don't mean mistakes with patients' life. There's a way we can actually sort that out with our training, but that can be a conversation for another time. But so far, those are my two questions. One is how I can connect with you, and two is where you see AI in healthcare going in Nigeria as a country, and maybe even Africa as a whole. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I will be brief. I think after this talk, I will call my mother. My mother is in Ibadan, by the way. I'll call my mother to tell her that her prayers are indeed working. What I want to tell her is somebody called Kila looked for me and they couldn't find me anywhere. So just like you said, so my mother's prayers are really working. All right. But that's a very that's a lot. I thank you for the very kind words. I thank you for wanting to connect. I'm very, 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 very happy to connect. Um, my details are very available from the MedLaw Hub. Please reach out to them. I think even earlier I shared my Twitter handle with the moderator. She I think she also put it up earlier. Feel free to connect as well. It feels so good to say follow me on Twitter. I've never done that before.
Dr. Ofunne, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but the Twitter account it keeps saying this account doesn't exist. So
at Ife69 at IFI69, all small letters.
Oh, all right, thank you then.
At IFI69. And if you go through my page, in fact, sometime last week or 2 weeks ago, I had a very interesting chat with some Niger doctors. I wanted to delete it, and I also wanted to draw the attention of the MedLaw group to it. But I'm glad then something just said now, maybe one day you would use it as a case study when you talk, because these are some of fantastic people I've met and I've really enjoyed sharing and learning from them as well. I had a very interesting conversation, and if you go in depth into my page, I discuss with a lot of Nigeria. Of course, most of them I don't know. I just follow one or two of my classmates. And one thing that shocks me is the dearth, as in DEARTH, the dearth of ethical knowledge in the Niger space. My brother, it's scary. We have all the clinical acumen, but we still do not understand things like, if you look at my pinned tweet on Twitter, I'm very big on patients' rights. I call myself a patients' rights advocate. I pinned something on Twitter that I wrote about 4 or 5 years ago, and I told myself I may just have rewritten the Hippocratic Oath. I care about patients. I love patients. I love helping people. That said, you are introducing something in a space where there is a very, 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 very poor or low understanding. Let me put it that way: low understanding of ethics. I stand corrected. I don't think there is any, or there are many medical schools that teach bioethics in Nigeria, even now with all the things we know now years later. So I say that I give you this introduction to say that if you have to do something in the Niger space, that's like what you're saying, you need to be aware of, there'll be a lot of resistance. There'll be a lot of people will not understand where you're coming from. But my advice to you, ab initio, would be to say, do the right thing. Have a very good ethical and or legal foundation, preferably ethical foundation. The details later why I prefer ethical to legal. Some of our laws, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, are still what I'll call quote unquote draconian. Um, my words or my understanding, I stand corrected, and I apologize if I offend anyone with that. But let me put it this way: some of our laws still need a lot of development, but ethics actually forms a foundation for a lot of things. So you are on the right track. My advice to you would be stick to your guns in terms of doing the right thing, stick to your guns in terms of being different positively, stick to your guns in terms of being ethical. I'm very happy to advise. And if you look at some of the slides, in answer to your other question, um, the slides I shared, I think slide 37, I'll just skim through briefly. Remember, therefore I said AI use in healthcare should form part of ongoing research and development. under the aegis of clinical innovation. So you should have your hypothesis on the positive uses, which I'm sure you've done already. You should have your risk versus benefit analysis at every stage in its use. So that helps you answer the question. You know, you shouldn't rely on your rest on your oars to say, okay, I've rolled this out. You must have a risk versus benefit analysis at every step. You must have expert guidance and ongoing moral competence. So you may be the first startup, or you may be the first health or health tech system in Nigeria that has a bioethicist in your panel. So if you're looking at health, you may have all the APROCO doctors. You may have there's this other very brilliant doctor I follow on Twitter, bearded Dr. Shino. He seems very intelligent. You may have all the bearded Dr. Shinos, the APROCO doctors, the very brilliant scientific minds. But what of your bioethicists? You should have one or two on your panel to advise you on every step of the way, because what you are rolling out, if you've listened, which I know you did, has health, it has legal, and of course it has ethical implications when you look at AI. So you may have your health covered, you may have your tech covered. Those two I know 100% Niger has it. But who are your medical legal consultants? Who are your bioethics ethicists? Who are your ethics consultants? So those are some of the things I believe we can talk at length going forward. And lastly, and most importantly, remember the issue of consent. So when we look at consent, some of the things I spoke about today would be make sure your patients are competent enough to give you consent, and also make sure your material risk. So at every step, whenever I teach this topic, especially to medical students or younger doctors, I always tell them, don't ever forget your material risks. At every step, you need to think about, and that is where, of course, your bioethicists or your medical legal consultants come in to advise you on where your material risks should be and what you should focus upon. With these few points of mine, I hope I've been able to at least say something, and maybe so that we can listen to the others. If there's any other question or something that isn't clear, please reach out. I'm very happy to discuss further. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Emmanuel has his hands on, but before we get to Emmanuel, I'm just going to read a comment in the chat box by Ogaga Ediru. It says the issue of AI liability still remains a Pandora box. There has been suggestions of AI personhood, liability against manufacturers, doctors, or hospitals, non-delegable duty to patients. At this point, there are only speculations because ethical issues have not developed to accommodate AI liability issues. It's an interesting issue in the health law space too. So thank you very much for your comment. I think we share the same line of thoughts concerning this issue, but we should always be positive that we can improve upon this area of medicine and in extension law. Emmanuel, please, if you can unmute and ask your question. Thank you for your patience. We'll listen to you now.
Thank you. Sorry, Emmanuel. Sorry, moderator. My apologies. I just want to say, that's a very nice post by the colleague Ogaga. But maybe we need to look at where he says at this point there are only speculations because ethical issues have not developed to accommodate AI liability issues. I do think that the ethical issues are very elaborate. It is we usually have our shortcomings, like I said in some of the slides, in our policy development and in our codified laws and statutes and stuff. But the ethics actually holds the key. Ethics is actually where we constructively rationalize. I think if you have grounded ethicists, we've thought about as many things as possible. Yes, of course, we can't think of everything, but we are better than the legal aspect in terms of what we've done and what we've achieved and problems we've solved. I just want to put that out there. But yes, really very nice, interesting perspective shared by the colleague there.
Thank you, Doctor, for the clarification. Emmanuel, please, we'll hear you now.
Thank you, moderator. Thank you so much, Doctor. That was very insightful. And
it was a presentation that I very much could relate to. My name is Emmanuel. I'm a medical lawyer and very passionate about law and health and AI and telemedicine and all that, which is my research area. Mine is not a question per se, it's just more of a comment generally. One thing that really fascinated me by your presentation was when you talked about AI dumping, right? And I just wondered because lately I've been doing a research on digital health colonialism, and I just wondered if it's synonymous because what's going on now, what we're seeing now is a lot of countries in the global south, African countries, sub-Saharan countries, for example, are trying to just copy what's going on in the global north. And the global north is just trying to, it seems there is this rhetoric of they're just pushing down their agenda through their tech giants and through philanthropic organizations. And I just wondered if it's a challenge for for global South countries in that we're thinking through how we can subsume AI into our system and to make it work for us. At the same time, we need to also um, be conscious of the realities of digital health colonialism. And I just wanted you to talk about that. So yeah, just that's what I was just thinking. And at the same time, I would also like to network with you, but you already answered that. I already followed you on your Twitter page. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, thank you. What's your name, sir?
Emmanuel.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Well, I think you've said it all. You let me try and say it in pidgin English. It's like now my mouth you won't hear I'm from. I think you've said it all. It's pretty much bang on the money in terms of colonialism, dumping, and stuff. However, what I would say is this: we shouldn't actually have this resistance to say anything from abroad, anything from the first world is automatically dumping. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we need to be careful. But how do we realize that it is not dumping? When we do a risk versus benefit analysis, where when we have bioethicists and or medical legal consultants who will be able to give us best advice, when we look at our consent processes and stuff, when we look at all the parameters, and I think this I'll refer back to that slide that I tried to give a roadmap. So yes, it's a thing, colonial, maybe I'll call it digital colonialism, like you said. It's a thing, yes. Ethics dumping. There could be brothers, there could be synonyms, there could be cousins, they could have same genetic makeup, as it were. However, where we may make a mistake is to say anything from the first world is a no. No, we can anything from the first world. What I'm telling you, colleagues, is we need to look at it critically. We need to look at how it best serves us. We need to look at how it protects our patients. We need to look at a risk versus benefit analysis. And when we do that at every step, then I think we can win. So if somebody is telling us use AI X, for instance, so we say, fine, bring AI X. Let's look at it. Let's critically analyze it. Let's appraise it. How beneficial is AI X in Mushi? How beneficial is AI X in Ijesha Tedo? Those are some of the things we need to look. When we have that understanding, we know what it could be if we do not critically analyze it, if we do not appraise it. So we need to just look at it from that lens to say anything you give us, we'll look at it, just look at what we can take from it, how it benefits us. And if it doesn't benefit us, then it becomes dumping. That is the idea. Okay. If we look at it from that angle. And when we say for it to benefit us, I'm talking about benefiting the patient, protecting their rights, protecting their dignity. Because I need to also remind us that some of the ethics dumping, there was some benefits. Remember, most of the time in sub-Saharan Africa, we literally beggars. We have our balls in our hand. Anything you give us, we will take. So it may benefit us, but it may also harm us. So we need to look for those harms, our dignity, our patients' autonomy. Have they been protected? Then our patients' health. So, and which brings me to a point I made earlier when I spoke with my brother earlier, Richard Keeler, where I said, trust me, in the Niger health space, we have our tech. That's a tick. We have our very brilliant doctors. That's a tick. Where we may have problems may be in the ethical space. So, in terms of benefit, I'm sure, oh, it's going to treat some new strain of malaria tick. Okay, doctors are going to, you now have this doctor saying, come to my hospital, I have the best tech. Fine, tick. However, if there's any ethical legal issue in that thing, that's where we may have problems, and that's where AI or that's where bioethics and the law would help solve problems. I don't know if I've answered your question or if I understood the question enough to do justice, but not everything from the first world should we look at as the enemy. What I'm saying is anything that is given to us, we need to critically appraise to see how it ticks our boxes, both clinically, ethically, and legally. I submit.
Yes, absolutely, doctor. That's spot on. Although I wasn't trying to make the case that we should completely disregard whatever is being sent from the global north. I was just saying that AI dumping and global health colonialism just kind of sounded similar to me, and I wanted you to just speak to that. So thank you.
I hear you, sir, and thank you for the clarification as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Doctor. It has been a very interesting session today. For being here with us today. And for anybody who wants to connect, I believe that his Twitter X handle is already in the chat box. So before we close for today, I would just like to call on Mr. Damilare Adeye. He's the founder of Medlaw Hub. 5 minutes, please, not more than that, because people have places to be, but would like him to speak very briefly about Medlaw Hub and what we do. Mr. Damilare, please. You're muted. We can't hear you. You're muted.
Okay, thank you so much. Hello, everybody. I just wanted to be in the audience and keep enjoying the discussion and the presentation. Thank you so much, Dr. Ofunne. Proudly a member of the Medical Hub. I can't thank you enough. It's really a pity that we couldn't have our second speaker as well. I was really prepared to enjoy his presentation as well. So the webinar is organized by the Medical Law Hub. I want to believe most of us are familiar with it. It's more or less a virtual hub, and this is just one of the things we do. If you are not familiar with the website, a lot of questions we're getting here as well. We've had research work on it already published on the website. So you might want to check the website. There's so much to gain there on this concept of consent and of privacy. There's so much to gain there. And we have so much going on presently. For instance, the issue of ethics. We have a weekly post on specifically LinkedIn that we put out for people to have their say, like a poll on ethical dilemma. So we'd like you to contribute to the discussion as well, so you can check that and see and share your view. You know, it's a poll. It's been running for just over a month now, and it will be for roughly 3 months. So you can join the conversation, share your opinion, whether you are a medical law expert or a student or a lawyer or a doctor. We'd like to know your opinion so that we can help develop that space as well. So thank you once again for being here, our moderator. Thanks for the great job. I can see some of our members here as well. Yusuf, Balogun, and Medical Law Hub, yes, it's mainly in Nigeria, but we have global members as well, expat, because we are not limiting it to just Nigeria. So if you are looking forward to even benefiting from other expats, you could also enjoy a lot of things with content we put out there. We have, yes, Mr. Omar is from Saudi Arabia, is also a member of the hub. So it's not a local hub, you know, we are worldwide. And so yes, there's so much you can gain, especially if you are just starting to learn about the hub. There's so much to gain. We are experts in our own field as well. I'm a medical lawyer myself. We have doctors. Dr. Ofunne, for instance, is also an expert in medical law. We have lawyers who are connected to medical law one way or another. And we also have interns. So we are trying to actually build a space in Nigeria right now by helping to initiate medical law clubs. I'm sure some of the students here are aware of that, so that you know it's not a new thing anymore. Everybody is now aware of it, because that is how we can really save the country in that regard. We can't afford to be ignorant, and by doing so, I believe in the next couple of years things will be different. So I believe I've spent my 5 minutes. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and it's really nice having you all around. We always have our webinars every quarter, every within 4 months of every year. So at least 3 every year. So please look forward to being part of the next one. It's going to be very didactic. You're going to learn so much more from it. Something that is practical, something you can put into your work as well. So thank you, and have a good time or weekend, I believe.
Thank you so much, Mr. Damnari. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to our lecturer, our speaker. I don't know if he's still here with us. Okay, I think he's logged up. But thank you so much for joining
I'm
us.
still here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. And we hope that by the time we call for our next webinar, we will see these same faces and these same names, and you know, you'll be willing to join us next time. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye, everybody.